Hi, it's Paul here from selfoutforlife.com, and in this video I'm going to talk about taking personal responsibility and how to know when you are taking personal responsibility. Now, the idea of taking responsibility is a core principle behind self-development. If you read any self-development books, you've probably come across this concept already. So what is taking personal responsibility? Well, it's being responsible for how you think about, deal with, and react to whatever happens in your life. It's not being responsible, in my view, for everything that happens in your life. It's being responsible for how you deal with it. So to give you an example, at the time of recording this video, we're in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic. So I don't believe that I'm responsible for that coming into my life. Now, maybe collectively we're responsible for it coming into, but no individual person can take responsibility for that. However, we can take responsibility for how we deal with it and how we react and respond to it, and also how we think about it. And taking personal responsibility is something you want to work on. You can always take more personal responsibility. There's always an opportunity to do that. Now, the idea of taking personal responsibility is one of the 10 strategies that I cover in my 10 Strategies for Your Success ebook. You can get that for free by going to selfoutforlife.com/success, or you can click the link in the description below this video. It's the first link in the description, or it will be the first link in the show notes if you're listening to the podcast version. So why is taking personal responsibility important? Well, it gives you more choices in how to think about the situation and more choices in how to respond. It gives you a sense of control. Often when something unexpected happens in life, you feel that you have a lack of control. But when you take more personal responsibility, it gives you that sense of control back. And that leads you to also having more personal power, so more of an ability that you feel you can influence in some way. It helps you focus on what you can do rather than what you can't do. It helps you go from victim to victor. It also helps you go from effect to cause. And it helps make you realize that these things are happening for you. They're happening for a reason rather than happening to you. And it's important to know that where you are today is largely based on the decisions and the actions that you took in the past. And I believe it's important that you take responsibility for that, even if where you are now is not where you want to be. And then taking personal responsibility is also about knowing that the decisions and the actions that you make today are going to lead to the future that you want. So what I'm going to do now is cover some of the specific activities and the specific strategies that people that take personal responsibility do. These are the things that I do, so you can use these to check off whether you're doing these things yourself. And if you're not, of course, now is a great time to start doing these. So the first one is setting and achieving goals. So if you don't set goals, you will be part of someone else's goal or part of someone else's plan. And about 15 years ago now, when I was in the UK, I was working in a law firm, and what had happened was a few of my colleagues had all resigned at around about the same time. So the workload had increased massively as a result. And it seemed like week after week, month after month, I was leaving the office at like 7 in the evening, and I'd be walking past all these people really relaxing in the pub and having a drink, and I was walking past them feeling a little bit miserable that I'd done another like 10 or 11 hour day in the office. And what was happening here was I had no real other goals in my life. I actually really enjoyed the job, so I didn't mind in a way putting in those extra hours, but I a little bit regret it now. So that's what happened. I didn't have any goals at that time, and as a result I became part of someone else's goal, someone else's plan, which in my case was the company. So you want to set big goals and then all the way down to small daily habits, so that each day you're setting the direction in your life rather than someone else unconsciously setting the direction for you. And when I say unconsciously, it's very easy for you to become part of someone else's life plan without you even realizing it. It's also about being intentional about how you spend your time, and intentional about the things that you do. So let me give you an example here. Let's say that you're trying to drink less alcohol at the moment. So being intentional would be saying, okay, I'm going to go out to the pub tonight and I'm only going to have 2 drinks, 2 beers or 2 glasses of wine. As opposed to not being intentional would be going to the pub and not thinking about that and maybe having 4 or 5 drinks. It could also be intentional about how much time you maybe spend watching Netflix or watching TV. It could be intentional about who you spend time with. So it's really just making sure that you're making that decision and you're being intentional about how you're living your life. Now, when you don't set goals, when you don't live intentionally, and when you don't take personal responsibility, you can find that years can go by, even decades, and not much changes. You could still be stuck in the same old dead-end job. You may not be where you want to be financially. Maybe your health is starting to suffer because you haven't been looking after your health. And you can go through what's called a midlife crisis at that point, where you really start to regret the things that you didn't do earlier in your life. And that's not a good place to be. So if you're in your 20s and 30s and you're watching this video, it's so important that you take personal responsibility, that you set goals and live intentionally, so that when you're in your 40s and 50s, you feel that you've had a good life, you've done the things you want to achieve, and really importantly, you're not living a life that you regret. So the second way to know when you are taking personal responsibility is when you are regularly overcoming fears. So fear is the biggest barrier to success. It's the biggest barrier to having an average life, a life where you settle for what is rather than what you really want. And when you can overcome fears, that allows you to have the good life, that allows you to have a great life, a fantastic life. Now, some of the fears that stop you, and have stopped me on occasions as well, is fear of the work involved. So fear that what's involved is just too difficult, too challenging, or is going to take too much time. Also fear of success. So fear of, if you are successful, what's that going to lead? How are people going to think of you? How are you going to deal with that? And also fear of rejection. I think this is a big one for many people. So a fear of what other people might think about you if you decide to go on this new path that's maybe quite different to what other people do. Remember, it's not others that stop you, it's you. Now, have you ever wondered what the acronym for fear is? You might have heard this already. It's false expectations appearing real. And that's so true. So often something that we fear, we really blow up in our mind, make it much bigger than it really needs to be. And then we begin to believe that that's real, and that's why we don't take action. And I'm sure you've probably had experiences in the past where you've taken action to overcome a fear, and you've wondered, what was all that about? Why was this such a big deal in my mind? So let me give you a couple of examples of fears that I have overcome in my life. So back in the late 90s when I was dating, I had two real fears. One was going up and talking to women, because that was really how you met women in those days. There was no internet dating at that time. And secondly, was if I did get their telephone number, was actually picking up the phone and asking to go out on a date. So they were two really big fears. And I noticed that whenever I did those things, I had a real sense of elation after that. And that is often what is on the other side of fear, is that sense of elation. And when you think a bit more about that, that can often make you do something that feels uncomfortable. And also I found that these things were no real big deal, but they were things that were stopping me from getting what I wanted, which was a relationship. And so I knew I had to do those things. The second one goes back to when I was at school. I think it was about 11 or 12, and I had a fear of jumping into the water out of my depth. So I could swim, but I couldn't jump in out of my depth. And it's one of those examples as well where the longer you don't do it, the worse the fear gets. Again, it's that false expectations appearing real. But when I finally did it, two things happened. Firstly, I felt wonderful, that sense of elation. And secondly, I thought, what was so big about this thing in the first place? Why did I make such a big thing in my mind about this? And it really was all in my mind as well. So the third way to know that you are taking personal responsibility is when you are responding positively to life events. So as I mentioned earlier, you cannot control everything that happens to you, but you can control your response. And Jack Canfield has a formula for this. It's events plus responses equals outcome. Now, what most people do, what unsuccessful people do, is they blame the event for the lack of results or the lack of an outcome, but they completely forget about the response part. Now, successful people change the responses that they have to the event until they get the outcome or the result that they want. So what are some of the responses that they would change? So firstly would be communication. So how can they communicate differently to get a different result this time, to influence that event in some way? Also, they will look at how they imagine it in their mind. So maybe they'll imagine it differently, more positively, to get a different result. Also, they'll change how they think about it, also how they feel about it, and also the specific actions that they're doing as well. And when you think about it, that's all you can really control. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I'm recording this video during the middle of the coronavirus pandemic, and this has been a really interesting time to see the way that people and organisations have responded positively to this. So some examples include online church services. Who would have thought that would have even been possible a few months ago? Or virtual choirs, or people like therapists and coaches moving their services to be all online, or people who are working from home that maybe have never been able to do that before, have really struggled with the technology, but they've had to step up and they've responded positively to that. I suppose in some cases there's been no other option, and sometimes it is like that when you're going through some kind of adversity. Sometimes that forces you to step up and do things that you believed you couldn't do, and that's certainly what's been happening at this time. So the fourth way to know when you are taking personal responsibility is when you are making your own decisions. So you're making decisions about what you want rather than decisions that someone else wants for you. So a good example of this could be your parents. Maybe your parents expected you to become a lawyer or a doctor, but maybe you really want to become a musician or an internet entrepreneur. And it's very easy to get pushed into what your parents want you to do. But when you're taking personal responsibility, you can stand up to them and do what's really in your heart and really follow your passion. It's also about making daily decisions and making them count. So this could be daily decisions about the foods that you consume, about exercise that you do or don't do. It could be about spending time on your mental health and your personal development and doing that consistently, because every decision you make on a daily basis will begin to compound over the years, and it's those decisions that you make every day that are going to really affect how your life is going to be in 5, 10 or 15 years time. You know, if you're making poor food choices every day, then it's not too surprising that in 5, 10 or 15 years there'll be some implications for that. If you are working on keeping fit and working on your mental health every day, then you're going to be a much better person in 5, 10 or 15 years as a result of just making those consistent decisions. So don't underestimate the power of making the right decisions on a daily basis, because they will compound and they will add up over time. So the next way to know that you are taking personal responsibility is when you are not blaming other people. So when you're not blaming the government, your spouse, your parents, your friends, your boss. Basically, when you're not blaming anybody except yourself. So why is blaming other people a problem? Well, when you blame someone else, you're giving your power away from you to them. And when you do that, you'll feel like a victim because you feel like you have no control. You also miss out on your chance to learn and to understand what you could do differently next time. So let's say at work your boss says or does something that makes you feel angry. Well, you could blame your boss for making you feel angry, or you could say, okay, well, what is it about what he said or did that made me feel angry? Maybe there was something that I was doing or not doing that made him say or do something in a certain way that made me feel angry. And also, it can allow you to realize that it's not someone else that makes you feel a certain way in the first place. So you can see how taking responsibility can lead to you having a different response and maybe looking at that in a different way, a way that's more positive to you. When you blame someone else, that keeps you stuck and that keeps you powerless, again, because it means you don't have any control. And if everybody blamed someone else for everything that happened, then no one would be successful, because you have to take personal responsibility to be successful and to change something in some way. So the next one is not complaining. Now this is an interesting one. To complain about anything, you have to know that something better exists out there. Otherwise you have nothing to compare it against. So when you're complaining, you're comparing what something is right now with what you think it should be. However, complaining is a choice. People often complain because it makes them feel better temporarily. Sometimes it makes you feel that people take pity on you, or it can be a way of maybe releasing some anger as well. But really, complaining is an excuse for not taking action and not taking responsibility. It's often used as an excuse for not facing the fear or the risk that you need to take and doing the action that you know is important to make something happen. The problem with complaining is that it doesn't solve anything and it keeps you stuck. So the next way to know that you are taking personal responsibility is when you are taking charge of your thoughts and feelings. So with thoughts, it's knowing that all the thoughts that you have in your mind, the 60,000 thoughts that we have each day, it's knowing that those thoughts are not really you. You are the observer. You are the one that's watching those thoughts, and you can decide which thoughts to pay attention to, which to ignore, and which ones to challenge. And I go into this a lot more in another video about how to tame your negative internal voice, which will appear up here right now. Now also it's about taking responsibility for your feelings. Now this can involve taking action in spite of how you feel. So when you don't feel like doing something, you feel like procrastinating, it's when you take action anyway. And all successful people do this. They do things when they don't feel like doing them. I often record videos when I don't feel like doing them. But what I do find is that when I start doing something that I don't feel like doing, I'll find that the positive feelings start to come. So feelings follow action, not the other way around. It's also important to know when to stop too. So listen to your body. Maybe if you're feeling burnt out or you're feeling tired, you know that it's time to stop what you're doing and take a break. So the next way to know that you are taking personal responsibility is when you are not making excuses. Now this one is similar to blame, especially if someone else is the excuse. So some people might blame their parents or their upbringing for not being able to do something. But more often than not, making excuses is more about you. So it could be saying that I'm not smart enough, I'm not intelligent enough, I'm not outgoing enough. Or it could be about timing, saying that this is not the right time to start an online business or to start exercising or losing weight. Or it could be other external factors such as the weather. So why do people make excuses? Well, they do it to take away their power. They can almost say like it's not my fault. But when you do that, you're also taking away your personal responsibility. People also do it to feel better. But this is always a short-term thing, because by delaying something that they need to do, well, it feels better because they're not doing something that feels hard. However, that will start to impact you in the long term with feelings of regret. And another reason why people make excuses is it's a way of not needing to face the fear. So it's easier to make an excuse rather than to do the thing that you don't want to do because you have a fear around it. The problem with excuses is that when you first make them, you know they're a lie, you know they're not really true, but as you keep making the same excuses, they begin to form a belief in your mind, and over time you begin to believe that those excuses are true for you, and that's not a good thing. So the next one is to know what really brings happiness. So this is about realizing that happiness is not linked to some future goal. It's more of a habit that you can cultivate daily. Happiness also comes from helping, caring and serving other people. And it also comes when you're living to your values, you know what's important to you, and you feel that you're on purpose with your life as well. Happiness is also about being grateful for what you already have right now. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm recording this video during the coronavirus pandemic, and that's making myself and most other people as well become very grateful for things that they used to take for granted. So just being grateful for being healthy and being well, being grateful that your family and your friends are okay, being grateful for whatever money you have right now, even if it's less than what you had before. You can always find things to be grateful for, you just have to go looking for them. So the last way to know that you are taking personal responsibility is when you're putting yourself first but helping others as well. So this is realizing that you can't help people really effectively when you don't feel good about yourself and when you don't take time out for yourself. Of course, you can still help people, but it won't be as easy and it won't be as enjoyable. And this is the reason why on planes they always tell you to fit your own oxygen mask before helping others. So this is really about taking time for your own personal development, taking time for your own growth, your own learning and your own health and your own fitness, because you'll be much more able to help other people when you have the health and you have the energy and the vitality to do that. It's also about knowing that your happiness can come from helping other people as long as you do it with a sense of gratitude and you don't feel you're doing it as a chore. So I encourage you to treat what I've just covered is like a roadmap for taking personal responsibility. So go through each of the ways that I've mentioned and ask yourself, are you really doing that? Or is that something you can improve on? And remember that taking personal responsibility is something that you have to constantly work on. It's something that I'm always working on. Your brain finds it very easy to blame and make excuses. So it's important to just keep focusing on the whole idea of taking personal responsibility and being at cause. And as I mentioned at the start of this video, Taking responsibility and being at cause is one of a number of success strategies. I cover the other ones in my free ebook called 10 Strategies for Your Success. You can get this ebook by going to selfhelpforlife.com/success, or clicking the first link in the description below, or the first link in the show notes if you're listening to the podcast version. So I'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and I look forward to sharing more great content with you very soon. Bye for now.